Welcome to the VP Marketing Show, a podcast that takes you deep inside high-performing marketing teams to learn what they do, how they do it, and how they get better every day. We cover strategy and execution, brand and demand, metrics and team structure, today's realities, and tomorrow's opportunities. If you lead a marketing team, you aspire to the top job, or you're a CEO who hires and manages a VP marketing, this is the podcast for you. You're a marketing leader. To a great extent, your success is going to depend on how well you work with the sales leader. It's often said that if these two fail to work well together, it's the marketing leader who will be shown the door. In this episode, we dig deep into getting this critical relationship right. My guest is Kyle Norton, head of retail sales at Shopify. He's a highly skilled and experienced sales leader who's built big teams and delivered big results in several high-growth organizations. We cover a lot of very important ground. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Please welcome Kyle Norton, head of retail sales at Shopify. Kyle, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We all know Shopify, obviously. But what's retail sales at Shopify?
The retail product line within Shopify is primarily built around our point of sale solution. So it's software for brick and mortar merchants. Merchants who are selling out of a physical location to have the same tools and capabilities that Shopify provides online. For a long time, Shopify has been the best-in-class solution to start and run an e-commerce business. And if you believe, like we do, that the best businesses will take advantage of this omni-channel mentality, so selling across all channels seamlessly, then obviously we had to present and provide the same quality of tools to brick-and-mortar merchants. So we've been making massive investments in the technology over the last couple of years. We're actually just re-releasing a all new point of sale rebuilt from the ground up in March. And so I've joined Shopify in the last 6 months to essentially help bring that to market. So building a new sales organization within Shopify to go aggressively capture a lot of market share, we hope.
How big a portion of Shopify's overall business is retail?
It's not a significant portion currently. It is a significant portion of the market, however. So about 80% of commerce is still done in person. Only about 20% is done online. And Shopify has obviously built a massive business just operating in that online segment of the market. So we feel very bullish about the opportunity that this presents us in the market.
So this is a huge growth opportunity for the firm.
Definitely one that is top of mind for the company to lean into if you've listened to any recent analyst calls, quarterly earnings calls.
And are you up against any well-established competitors who own a huge chunk of the market, or is POS a really fragmented place?
There are a number of really entrenched older technologies. If you've ever been into a retail store and you see people hammering away on a black and green screen, that shows you the state of some of the market, the legacy part of the market. But then there's also a lot of up and coming software companies that have carved out big niches. Lightspeed, Vend, Square is obviously one that everybody has experienced, Clover. So there's a lot of players in the space. Shopify is very unique because we are built from omni-channel first. So if you believe, as most of the research and all the experts would say, the companies who will succeed in the long term are omni-channel. Shopify is really the only company that is omni-channel from first principles, essentially. So we feel good about that being our differentiation in a fairly crowded space.
How big is your sales team?
We're about 30 right now. So I inherited a team of about 6 months ago. We've grown to what we consider to be a pretty healthy pilot size to build the right systems, establish correct positionings, process, hire some strong leaders. And as we move into 2020, we're going to aggressively grow that team here in the US, make a pretty good run of things.
From 7 to 30 in less than 6 months and a lot more growth to come.
Yeah. We're just at the beginning now. As my old CEO used to say, we want to look back and think about this as being cute. Oh, remember when we were just this little 30-person team? That's the goal in 12 months from now.
I love it. Is this a high-velocity transactional sales motion, or is it longer and more strategic?
Yes, about 80% of our deals are single location merchants, existing Shopify customers they're very high velocity, so 1 to 2 call close, very compelling positioning. There are some deals that we're running that are more strategic with some of Shopify's larger customers. That's not as much of a focus now, but there are a number of Shopify merchants that are very eager to pull us up market just because it is a compelling business case, but predominantly high velocity, inbound driven. There's a SDR team following up on marketing generated, product generated MQLs. And then they go to a retail ambassador and account executive that's running typically sub 2-week deal process.
Let's talk more about that marketing play and the interface between sales and marketing. You said it's primarily inbound based. What does the relationship between sales and marketing look like? Is it an old school model of marketing creates a whole bunch of leads and tosses them over the fence to you and your team? Or is it something more collaborative than that?
Definitely a more collaborative situation. We're actually just the same way that the sales team is just getting built. The marketing infrastructure is being heavily invested in right now. We have a couple people that are dedicated to retail from the marketing org, and now we're making a big investment in that infrastructure. We're actually looking for a head of retail marketing, which will be a senior person that is going to take ownership from product marketing to demand gen, brand, et cetera, et cetera. So we've had a really collaborative relationship so far. I would include product within that as well. Shopify has grown largely as a product organization over a number of years, and even marketing was a newer concept for Shopify a number of years ago. The company is product first. The product has largely grown this to significant size company. Marketing was the second major piece of go-to-market infrastructure, and now sales is quite new for the core side of Shopify. So I would include them as the third component of a pretty collaborative ecosystem.
In a lot of companies, there's a fair bit of friction between sales and marketing. I'm going to presume that as both of these teams are being built from the ground up at rapid speed, that you guys have the opportunity to avoid that and really get it right out of the gate. But easier said than done. How is that relationship working? And have you hit any pitfalls in working together?
No pitfalls so far. I think Shopify does a great job establishing a culture in which you're not really supposed to put up walls and operate in silos. They certainly want to encourage people to work cross-functionally, and I sit in a pod with our product marketing people, with our demand gen people, with merchant success and business operations. So we're all physically together, which certainly helps. And we're working on a whole number of projects that requires input from across the board. And I think in general, that's obviously a great best practice, is to establish a culture where there is accountability, but less ownership. Like, this is my thing, don't touch my thing, I know my thing better than you do. Certainly the best environments I've been in, and we're experiencing that here, is where the product marketing people are interested in what sales has to say and what the market is feeding us. And I'm really interested in what product marketing is doing because they're closer to product and research than I am. It's early days for sure, but I would say we've been successful creating a collaborative environment. We're going to lean into that heavily because we all understand that it's so critical.
And this is the third company now that you've had senior sales roles, Vision Critical, League, now Shopify. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, I had a fairly senior role at the first company that I worked for, but wasn't in the technology space. So much simpler environment and overly sales driven, I would say. Out of those three interactions, some have been great and some have been not as great. So I've seen both sides of it.
Let's talk about that. When and how can the relationship between sales and marketing go wrong, and why?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you were alluding to is marketing, primarily demand gen function and operating in a silo and kicking over MQLs to sales. Where things have worked really well was a shared ownership. At League, I would say we did a great job creating a really positive relationship between marketing and sales, and especially demand gen and our BDR function. And one of the things that helped there was a shared target. There was very little attribution, sales versus marketing. We didn't put that up in reports. We didn't talk about it weekly or quarterly. It was just not something we really talked about. The growth director and the BDR director had the same exact number. And whether or not it came from the BDR's cold calling or the marketing folks driving paid ads or events, it was irrelevant. And that created a really symbiotic relationship. On the flip side, I've also been in environments where we shared very separate targets and had different understandings of the data. And so I think the two really important best practices that those different experiences have shared is, one, the targets you set are very critical, and the more alignment there is and the more you share the same numbers, the better. Now, certainly you have to have accountability for the thing that you're a specialist in. So demand gen has to be worried about driving traffic and converting that traffic into qualified MQLs for sure, but they also have to have a consistent pulse on what's getting closed and if they're helping drive funnel. And the other best practice that really comes out of it is like everybody understanding the same data and everybody being on the same page with an understanding of current state and an agreed upon view of the business. The story I can tell there, which we've talked about before, is I've been in an environment where the reporting was so siloed that at a QBR, a marketing leader presented a report in which their report would have indicated, and what they were saying was they generated a dollar value of ARR in that quarter that exceeded the total dollars closed in that quarter. So obviously that can't be true.
How on earth did they arrive at that obviously erroneous conclusion?
The underlying report was counting ARR for every stage change. And so every deal that closed in that quarter was also counted however many times it changed stages in that quarter as well.
Oh, so the final deal got counted like 4, 5, 6 times, whatever, based on how many stages there were in your funnel?
Yeah, they were enterprise deals. So, if there was 2 stage changes for a single op that closed in that quarter, then all of a sudden there was 3 $250,000 ARRs counted.
Yeah, that could be a problem.
And that's shared reporting.
And that got all the way to a QBR, which also is indicative of the fact that you guys weren't really sharing information on a day-to-day basis either, or else that would have been found and addressed much sooner in lower stakes.
Yeah. Shared reports, shared dashboards, like a shared conversation around the metrics is what I think worked really well at League. The BDR director and growth director used the same exact views to understand their business. There was no siloed view of the business. They used the exact same information to make decisions from, and that was really productive.
So in practical terms, let's talk a little bit more about how shared targets works, because it obviously makes so much sense on the surface, but I want to go below the surface. So let's say I'm the marketing leader, you're the sales leader, and we have a shared target to grow the business by X. And you say, so I need to hire a whole bunch more SDRs and to generate that demand. Then I say, and I need to do a bunch more digital marketing and a bunch more trade shows and a bunch more stuff. And that's how we're going to get there. But together, what we want to spend is beyond the business's willingness to spend. If we have shared targets and it's just like, hey, all the business cares about is getting there, how do we deal with that conflict or potential conflict that I'm going to lean on a marketing way of getting there, you're going to lean on a sales way, and we can't both get everything we want?
That's a great question, and definitely where conflict and friction arises, because it can be very much a win-loss type of arrangement. And I think there's a couple things at play. One is both people have to go deep on the data and come to the same conclusion about both sides of the business. So we have to have a deep understanding of how does that demand gen investment actually translate into pipeline and what happens with that pipeline. You can't have a reasonable conversation unless the data is good. And so somebody has to really own that. So I'm always a big proponent of like invest in RevOps early and invest in somebody good and ergo expensive, even though sometimes it's tough to do as a scale up. But having a good idea of the data, having a reasonable conversation about the different paths to get there. And then it's ultimately you want to test. It's like, let's test and gauge the investment of additional BDRs. Let's gauge the investment of additional demand gen spend. But if you can have 2 people in those roles or multiple people across all these roles that have a high level of trust in one another, and you only get trust by spending time, I think, working on things together. If you have a high degree of trust and high degree of transparency, you should get to the number that you can agree upon.
So
It's not
you're
easy.
still going to be measuring customer acquisition cost by SDR prospecting versus by trade shows versus by digital market. You're still measuring these things so you can allocate resources in the most effective way, but ultimately the sales leader and the marketing leader co-own the outcome, and you need to come to an agreement on how to best allocate the resources. Am I getting that right, or correct me if I'm not?
No, that I would say that's a pretty fair summary. The more blunt version is lock those two people in a room and let them come to a conclusion, arm them with the right data. And if they have the same number, ultimately, it's like, I don't really care if it comes from a web form or it comes from an event or it comes from ABM. What is the most efficient path to use these dollars to get to the outcome? And because ultimately it's never sales or marketing, it's always both. League was very much, it was enterprise, and we did a lot of ABM, and that's the most blurry it can get between sales and marketing. But we made an investment in that program based on both sides, sales and marketing, thinking that that was the right approach. And it meant events and it meant a certain type of headcount. But if you start with the objective first, if you don't start with like, I need my investment in and I want to hire more reps, if you start with like, okay, what is the shared objective? Where do we need to get to? And we're in charge of problem solving together to get there, then I think with reasonably smart, trusting people, then you should be able to get there. The shared objective is everything.
How do you think about where brand figures into this? Some business leaders would say brand is super important and it floats all boats in terms of measurable outcomes. Others would say that in B2B, brand is not particularly important. Maybe it's a nice to have, but it's not a place to be spending a lot of time or a lot of money. And you really ought to be more focused on directly measurable demand gen. This can be a point of conflict between a marketing leader and a sales leader, bring a CEO and bring others in there. And it can be very ripe for conflict.
Yeah.
How do you think about that question?
I think a balance is definitely important, because typically the answer you'll get from a sales leader is, I just need leads. Just go spend money on demand gen. Don't do this brand investment or white paper. Like, just go spend that money on Google AdWords and LinkedIn and like get me ops. That's a narrow aperture, I think, to think through, because we've all been in deals where you're competing against a really established incumbent. You just want this person to trust your tool. And so part of brand is, how do you show up on G2 Crowd? What do people say about you online? Do you have great case studies and testimonials to be able to present? And do you come across in a really professional, tight way to your prospects? If salespeople were not known for great decks necessarily. If your like reps are making content because they need to do a comparison, like, that's not a great place to be. And you put that in the brand category. Yeah, I definitely believe in a brand investment. It's all about balance. And ultimately the answer is always, it depends. It depends on your growth stage. It depends on your target market. It depends on what your company objectives are, because sometimes you don't have the runway to do a big brand investment. You're trying to raise a round, you're trying to get to a goal, and ultimately sales and marketing need to have a shared understanding of, this is what needs to happen in the business, and that's why there need to be trade-offs.
How much of a role should marketing have in the decks that your team uses, perhaps their presence on LinkedIn and other social networks? Are these areas where marketing can add value, or are these areas where you prefer that you and the rest of your sales team really own that yourself?
I always encourage input from tangential groups that have a different skill set. So like, sales and marketing are going to design different decks. Like, we just speak through a different voice. We have a different, I think, sometimes point of view of that interaction, but it can always be valuable to have a marketing team give their input on a sales deck or take a leading role, but it needs both ultimately. Salespeople think through, could be a challenger methodology, or could be any number of the frameworks that are really popular. And like, that's how we want to set up our conversation. And it needs to be interactive, and we can't talk for too long. Like, there's these considerations that I think salespeople can bring to it. And then there's really interesting value that a marketing person can bring to that same messaging. And there might be a different level of polish. And so both opinions end up getting you to a better spot.
It's often said that the most crucial relationship that any CMO or VP marketing is going to have is with their sales leader counterpart,
Mm-hmm.
and that oftentimes in the event that those two don't see eye to eye, it's the marketing guy who gets shown the door. What advice do you have for marketing leaders working with you and people like you, whether it's this head of retail marketing who will come into Shopify at some point, or whether you want to think back on your experience in other organizations? What advice do you have for someone new in a marketing leadership role, how they can really nurture that relationship and hit the ground running?
I actually think the advice would be the same for both of those constituents. I think it all starts with empathy. You have to try to understand what's happening in this other person's world. The pressures of a marketing leader are different than the pressures of a sales leader. Like, we have different things that make us tick, and having an understanding of what their mandate is and how that other person can be successful is a great starting point. Leading with empathy, so for sure, is a great place to start. Like, try to build trust early, because there's going to be things that you disagree upon. That's just, you're going to disagree with everybody about something at some point. So trying to build that trust, because you're so intrinsically tied. If you have if you have large differences of opinions on critical things, that looks horrible for both people. Your CEO just wants those two people to get along. That is your entire go-to-market engine, and it needs to work really well. So I would say try to build trust early, and try to build trust when the stakes are very low, and start with a shared objective. Like, start with what are the things that we both ultimately want. We both ultimately want the company to grow. We want to grow our skill sets and our careers. We want to try to get an understanding of what are the things that these two teams want, and what are the objectives that are the same. And whenever you're in doubt or in conflict or operating in a silo, try to come back to those shared outcomes.
That's coming out loud and clear in pretty much every area that you're addressing, Kyle, is the fundamental importance of shared information, shared objectives, and really working together. So obviously the days of siloed sales and marketing are behind us, and success will be for those who really do figure that relationship out in really deep ways, like not only the human part of it, but the data, the processes really coming together as one team, despite perhaps some of the differences in personalities and some of the differences in frames of mind that they may approach. At the end of the day, as you said, sales and marketing absolutely have to work together. That's a non-negotiable fact. So I'm getting that loud and clear from you.
And I think the other thing that sometimes trips people up is we consider ourselves to be the experts in the thing that we do. Like, you raised the deck point. That's an area where you can see things be contentious. Like, no, I'm the salesperson. I know what goes in the deck. I'm the one in the room. You get entrenched into like, no one should be able to give me feedback on this because I'm supposed to be the expert. But if you can just lower the ego and welcome that feedback, then you come to a better place. And so understanding like the frame of reference that this other person presents, like, I think through Challenger. That's like the framework that I think works to view things through. So making sure that your marketing team understands some of the Challenger basics. And the same thing with marketing. They come from a different background. They believe in this core positioning model or this core like brand model, and really seeking to understand that can be really helpful as well. And taking a learner's mindset to know that, like, hey, there's probably lots of stuff that I can learn from these other teams will get you a lot farther.
You have a great opportunity to actually test that stuff as well, because you've got a large-ish and growing sales team. You've got a high velocity sales motion. If you do find yourself in a battle of this approach versus that approach, you have the ability to truly test it in a way that an organization that has a much smaller team or a much slower sales motion with very long sales cycles and high complexity in their sale couldn't ever test it. So, I mean, that's a wonderful place. Do you actually take advantage of that yet? I mean, I know it's very early in the growth of your sales team. But how do you think about that kind of testing? I mean, it seems to me an amazing opportunity to say, yeah, what if we did a really deck heavy sale versus a straight to demo sale? What if we did a pure challenger sale versus a different thing? What if we did the Zora, there's the greatest sales deck in the world approach versus something different? I mean, are you thinking about testing in those ways, given the luxury, let's say, that you have of many at-bats?
Definitely. So we've spent the last couple of months like building that core infrastructure to do some of this. We moved to a new instance of Salesforce. We're fixing a bunch of our data model to be able to do some of those things. There's an operations component which we're trying to lay right now to be able to do a lot of this testing and do it with a high degree of intelligence. One of the ways that we were able to do it very quickly is just through SalesLoft, because you don't need a lot set up. You can bring in the leads you want to work, throw them into a cadence. We had a bunch of the reps write different email sequences. We tested them. We looked at book rates, reply rates, and all that. And we tweaked our way to a new cadence that we were all really happy about. And the reps were happy about because they all got to participate in its creation. So for sure, I'm very excited about our ability to be data-driven and like test and tweak. You can throw ideas at the wall and see what happens. We did that. We were starting to think, well, maybe we should build some muscle to go outbound, because having an outbound function just gives you optionality. If you want to go to a new market that doesn't have an inbound volume, or you want to try a new tangential market, you can do that faster by being outbound. So we wanted to test if we could do it, and we spun it up in like 2 weeks. And now we've carved out 2 outbound segments that we're going to continue to invest in. So there's a lot of examples of being able to like get to an answer quickly, because we do have a lot of data, which is nice.
That's awesome. Well, you guys are on a great trajectory, it sounds like. I mean, I know Shopify is a true rocket ship, or whatever your preferred terminology for tremendous success is. And it sounds like the retail play has the opportunity to really further accelerate that. That's an exciting place you're at right now, Kyle.
Yeah, no, we're definitely excited about it. I think there's a big opportunity, and I'm eager to build out this marketing team to work with, because they're obviously going to be critical. So it's how you get there, I think, is the challenge. How do you get, without painful experiences, how do you get people to come faster to this idea? It's like, oh, sales and marketing should just play nice, and that'll probably be better for us.
Easily said, hard to do, but it sounds like you are doing it. Continued success, Kyle. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I really do appreciate it. It's been a great pleasure getting to know you a bit, and I look forward to continuing the conversation as you build that team and build this whole new market for Shopify. So thanks again, Kyle.
Appreciate the time. Thanks, Steve.
Kyle Norton, head of retail sales at Shopify. Thanks for listening to the VP Marketing Show. We hope you'll join us next time.